Hi, I'm Avanya. My in-laws said I was too dumb to notice they'd taken everything from me. And the worst part? I didn't notice, not for 5 whole years. They kept my grandmother's inheritance, took my name off the deed to my own home, erased me with a pen and a smile. I overheard them laughing about it at a family dinner. My husband said nothing. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I launched a plan. And now, I wonder, how many people are sitting at dinner tables, completely unaware they're being written out of their own lives? It was one of those evenings where the air felt heavy with false warmth. The living room buzzed with overlapping voices, cutlery clinked against porcelain, and the scent of Vera's roast chicken filled every corner of the house. I sat at the end of the long oak table, sandwiched between a half-empty bottle of white wine and Callista's teenage son, who barely looked up from his phone. I laughed when I was supposed to, nodded when someone looked my way, and pretended the smile on my face wasn't cracking at the edges. Being part of Lyle's family had always felt like standing outside a house, looking through its window. Married 5 years, and still, I was the guest who never quite earned a key. They never said it out loud, but their glances, their carefully phrased compliments, the way my ideas were so sweet, but never implemented, every bit of it screamed I didn't belong. Vera loved hosting these Friday dinners. "It's important to keep family close," she'd say with that rehearsed affection, as if the word family didn't have barbed wire wrapped around it. And I, ever the peacekeeper, brought a bottle of wine, dressed appropriately, and offered to set the table, even when no one ever asked me to. Midway through the meal, I excused myself. I told them I needed my scarf. The air in the dining room was suddenly too cold. Really, I needed a moment to breathe, to blink away the sting from Lyle dismissing my comment about real estate rates, like I'd confused a noun with a fork. The house was dimly lit, quiet away from the chatter. As I reached the hallway near the kitchen, I slowed, footsteps muffled by the thick rug beneath me. That's when I heard it. "She's too dumb to realize we've already taken everything from her." The words landed like a fist to the chest. Laughter followed, not muffled, not embarrassed, just casual, as if discussing what to do with leftovers. I froze, my hand gripping the frame of the hallway wall. "She still thinks the house is in her name," Callista said, followed by more laughter. Vera's voice added something I couldn't quite make out. And then, silence. Except for the ringing in my ears. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. I just stood there, hidden by the wall, listening to my own heartbeat hammering in my chest. Lyle's voice wasn't among the loud ones, but I knew he was there. His silence was the loudest confirmation of all. It wasn't just gossip. It wasn't an off-color joke. It was a truth they were comfortable enough to mock while sipping wine in their kitchen. My husband, his sister, their mother. I backed away slowly, careful not to creak the floor. I needed to be anywhere but here. My body moved on autopilot, down the hall, past the coats, back to the table. I sat down. Someone asked if I was feeling okay. I nodded. Vera passed me the potatoes. I spooned some onto my plate without looking up. I tasted none of it. Every smile at that table felt venomous. Every "pass the salt" felt like a betrayal dressed in pleasantries. I kept chewing, kept nodding, but inside I was unraveling. It wasn't just what they said. It was how easy it came to them. Later, when the plates were cleared and the kids ran off to play, I sat still, trying to glue my world back together quietly. That's when Callista's daughter ran up to me, clutching her doll, and chirped, "Mommy says you're just here for decoration." She giggled. The room went silent for a beat. Then Vera laughed lightly. Lyle chuckled awkwardly. "Kids, right?" he mumbled, before changing the subject. I felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. Again. It was never about the money. It was about erasure. They didn't just think I was stupid. They didn't think I mattered. I left soon after, claiming a headache. No one protested much. Lyle handed me my coat. Callista waved from the couch. Vera reminded me to take some leftovers. I nodded, declined, and walked out with a smile that didn't touch my eyes. In my car, I sat in silence. The house lights glowed behind me like a set piece in a theater. Perfectly arranged, perfectly fake. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I was hollow. That night, I didn't sleep. I replayed every word, every laugh, over and over. Morning came too fast. The light filtering through our bedroom blinds felt indifferent, clinical. I lay there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide whether yesterday had actually happened or if my mind had exaggerated everything. But my stomach answered before my brain did. A hollow ache, like something vital had been scooped out and discarded. I heard movement in the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast wafted in, followed by the soft hum of the radio, some upbeat country song Lyle always played on weekends. I wrapped my robe around myself and walked out, every step slower than the one before. He looked up when I entered. "Morning, babe. You want coffee?" I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "Sure." He poured me a cup like he had every other morning for the past 5 years. Nothing in his face gave away what I'd heard the night before. He was either a world-class actor or terrifyingly numb to it all. I took a sip. "By the way," I said, keeping my tone light, "did we ever finish updating the house documents after refinancing?" His spoon paused mid-stir in his oatmeal. "Yeah, that was months ago. Why?" "Just curious," I shrugged. "Did I sign everything, or is something still pending?" He laughed lightly, shaking his head. "Ivania, we handled all that. You signed everything. Remember? The day after our anniversary?" I nodded, but something inside me snapped into hyperfocus. That was the day he brought home a manila envelope and said, "Just routine paperwork, nothing big." I remembered asking if we needed to go over it together. He smiled and said, "Trust me." I excused myself shortly after breakfast, claiming a phone call from work. But I didn't go to my office. I went straight to the filing cabinet in the guest room. The folders were where they always were. Lyle kept things tidy, which made it easier for me to spot what didn't belong. One folder, newer than the others, was labeled Refinance Final. My hands were already shaking when I opened it. I found the deed immediately. The revision date matched what he'd said. But my name? It wasn't there, just his. I stood in place, staring at that line like it would change if I blinked hard enough. But it didn't. The property now belonged solely to Lyle. He hadn't lied when he said I signed it. He just hadn't told me what I was signing. That evening, I sat on the back porch. The spring air was warm, but it did nothing to ease the chill working its way through my chest. I held the deed in my hands like it was a weapon I hadn't known he was holding against me. Flashes came back. Vera telling me how she and her husband always kept titles clean to protect family assets. Callista laughing over wine once, saying, "You're just so easy to trust." At the time, I'd taken it as a compliment. Now I understood what she really meant. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a strategy. The next day, Vera texted the family group chat to invite everyone to dinner. Low-key, just family time. Her tone sounded sweet, but now I knew better. I went. Dinner was quiet. No big stories, no teasing. Just an odd sense of expectation hanging in the air. Vera asked if I was still working with those complicated clients. Callista followed with, "You're not poking around property stuff again, right?" I looked across the table at Lyle. He didn't meet my gaze. He poured more wine into his mother's glass and acted like I hadn't heard a word. That was all the confirmation I needed. They weren't just hiding something. They were betting I'd stay too passive to dig. After dinner, back home in bed, I lay staring at the ceiling again. I opened my phone and typed a note to myself. Find out if the insurance changed too. I whispered it aloud in the darkness, barely moving my lips. If they want me blind, I'll learn to see in the dark. Rain had started around 4 that afternoon and hadn't let up. It was that steady, rhythmic kind of downpour that blurred the world outside and seemed to muffle everything inside too. I sat at my desk, the only light in the room coming from the lamp at the corner. casting long shadows across the piles of paper spread out before me. Lyle had taken a late work call in the living room and turned the volume up just enough to keep me from hearing the details. That was fine. I wasn't listening to him anymore. I was listening to everything else. My laptop was open, but I hadn't typed anything in over 20 minutes. My hands hovered above the keyboard as my eyes scanned the folders I'd pulled out of our file cabinet. Tax returns, mortgage statements, utilities, all the usual noise. I had sorted them into neat rows, not because it helped, but because it gave me something to control. Beneath an old lease agreement, I found it. A small leather-bound notebook. It smelled like her. Faint traces of lavender and vanilla still lingered in the worn edges. It was my mother's journal. I didn't remember putting it there, though I must have done it myself after the funeral. I hadn't touched it since. My fingers trembled as I opened it, not out of fear, but something more raw, like guilt. Guilt that I hadn't missed this sooner. Guilt that I was only now reading her thoughts when I needed something from her. I flipped past grocery lists and scripture notes until I landed on a page dated exactly 6 months before she died. Trust is a luxury your new family can't afford to give you, she'd written in her careful, slanted script. That sentence shattered something in me. I closed the book and held it against my chest, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. I hadn't cried when I found out about the deed. I hadn't cried at dinner, when they tried to make me feel crazy. But now, sitting alone in my home office with her words burning into my chest, I broke. Not sobbing, not wailing, just tears rolling down my cheeks without permission. It lasted less than a minute. Then I wiped my face and got back to work. I turned to my browser and logged into our shared bank account, then clicked through until I reached the secondary savings account I'd set up before we got married, my emergency money. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was mine. Or, it was supposed to be. The balance read 000. I stared at the number, waiting for it to change, thinking maybe it was an error, a lag in the system. But the number held. Under transaction history, a single line glared back at me. Family fund transfer, authorized by Lyle. 3 months ago, Lyle had told me he needed to help his mom cover something unexpected. "I'll use the joint account," he said. "You won't even notice." And I hadn't, because I hadn't looked, because I believed him. My jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. I took a breath through my nose and clicked print. The printer hummed to life beside me. I reached for my planner and cross-referenced dates. 3 months ago, he'd taken that money the same week he bought Callista a new laptop for her home business. I had complimented him for being such a supportive brother. I highlighted the date. 2 weeks later, he told me not to worry about the CPA for our taxes. "Callista's friend is doing ours this year," he'd said. "It's a favor." I highlighted that date too. I built a timeline, event after event, smile after smile, every favor they asked, every errand they offered to run on my behalf. It was all there, all of it. Not just betrayal, documentation. At some point, the rain outside had stopped and the house was quiet again. I sat back in my chair, staring at the files I'd printed. They looked innocent enough, but I saw them now for what they really were: footprints, evidence, proof that everything I had feared wasn't paranoia. It was planning. It was policy. I opened a new message on my phone and stared at the blank screen. Then I typed, "Do you know someone in probate and property fraud?" It was late, but I didn't care. I hit send. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Meet me Thursday. Bring everything." Saturday crept in with the kind of silence that felt rehearsed. Rain from earlier in the week had dried into a sticky warmth, and Austin's spring air carried the usual scent of cut grass and something burning, probably someone trying too hard to grill in their backyard. Around midday, I got a text from Vera. "Dinner tonight, just family. Hope you can make it." No apologies, no explanations, just an expectation. I stared at the message longer than I needed to. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part, sharper now, harder, Knew I had to go. Not to reconcile, to study, to observe, to remember every word said and unsaid. By 6:30, I was pulling into their driveway. Lyle had offered to ride together earlier that day, but I made up a vague excuse about errands. He hadn't pushed, probably because he was too busy resetting the lock on our front door. That morning, I had come home from the grocery store only to find that my key code no longer worked. I stood there, bags sweating in my hands, confused. When I called Lyle, he answered cheerfully. "Oh, I updated the system last night. Meant to text you the new code. Sorry about that." He said it like it was nothing, like locking me out of my own house was a scheduling error. I didn't argue. I told him to text me the new code. I thanked him even. Then I added it to the growing list in my head of things they didn't think I'd notice. The house looked the same as always. Perfectly lit, fireplace going despite the warm weather, candles flickering in the hallway. Vera opened the door before I could knock. "Ivania, so good to see you. You look lovely, sweetheart," she said, with a brightness just a notch too high. Callista was behind her, holding a glass of white wine and wearing the same smirk she always did. "Those earrings are so fun. Where'd you get them? Target?" She meant it as a compliment, I think. Or maybe not. It didn't matter. Lyle appeared from the kitchen with a beer in hand. He smiled too quickly. "Glad you made it," he said. I nodded, stepped inside, and said nothing. Dinner was already plated. Chicken, roasted vegetables, the usual spread Vera made when she wanted things to feel wholesome. The family filtered into the dining room, kids running around, Vera shooing them toward the den, laughter that felt staged echoing off the high ceilings. We sat. I was placed between Callista and Vera. Lyle took the head of the table. His father had once sat there. Now it was him. Symbolism, I guessed. As the meal went on, the tone never shifted. Everyone was polite, cheerful, too cheerful. No one mentioned the bank account. No one asked how I was doing. It was a play, and they had rehearsed their parts. Halfway through the main course, my phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced at it. A message from Callista. "She's getting suspicious. Play it cool tonight." My eyes stayed on the screen. My fingers didn't move. I didn't react. I just set the phone face down on my napkin and smiled across the table. "More carrots?" I asked, voice steady. Vera beamed. "You always know how to keep things balanced." I wondered if she heard herself. For the rest of the meal, I watched them closely. Callista stealing glances at her phone, fidgeting with her wineglass. Lyle avoiding my eyes entirely. Vera performing maternal grace like it was an Olympic sport. At one point, Vera raised a toast. "To Lyle," she said, lifting her glass, "for stepping up and showing what true leadership looks like at home." Everyone clapped. I sipped my water. Later, as people lingered over dessert, Callista caught me watching her and smirked. "Everything okay, Ivania?" I held her gaze. "Perfect." She misread it, thought I was cornered, thought I was too frozen to act. Let her. After dinner, I left quietly, said thank you, complimented the food, hugged Lyle with one arm, drove myself home. Once I was back, I changed out of my dress, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The folder of documents sat on my desktop, a small icon with big consequences. I renamed it. Operation Phoenix. Monday arrived with a dull ache behind my eyes that wouldn't quit. I told myself it was the wine from Saturday, the tension, the smiling. But the migraine settled deep, and by late morning, I decided to stop pretending and walked into the urgent care a few blocks from the office. I hadn't been there in a year, maybe 2. The receptionist smiled at me from behind the plexiglass, tapping on her keyboard. "Name? Ivania Hale." She typed, nodded. "Date of birth?" I gave it. She paused, squinted at the screen. Do you have your insurance card with you?" I fished it out of my wallet, slid it under the glass. Her fingers clacked again. Then she looked up, tone changing. "I'm sorry, but it looks like you're not listed as a dependent on this plan anymore." I blinked. I'm sorry, what? She turned the screen toward me, showing a red highlight across my name. Removed from policy. 1 month ago. My pulse thudded in my ears. That's a mistake. My husband handles all of that. She gave a polite shrug. You're welcome to self-pay today, or we can put you in as uninsured and bill later. I nodded, mute. Self-pay is fine. I went through the appointment like a mannequin. Blood pressure, reflex check, basic questions. Nothing alarming. Just a lingering fatigue and pressure behind my eyes, neither of which they could fix. Back in the car, I sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes before pulling out of the lot. I didn't cry. Not yet. That night, I cooked dinner like usual. Lyle came home around 7, kissed my cheek like always, and opened a beer before sitting down. Over baked salmon and asparagus, I casually asked, Hey, did we switch insurance providers recently? He chewed slowly. Oh yeah, I meant to tell you. It's a new plan through work, better premiums. Didn't know you had time to fill out all the forms, I said, keeping my tone light. He shrugged. It was just a portal. HR sent a link. I took care of it. I smiled and reached for the salt. Thanks for thinking ahead. Inside, I was boiling. The kind of rage that doesn't shout. The kind that sharpens. After dinner, while he showered, I went through the mail pile on the kitchen counter. Insurance documents, unopened, were buried between a catalog and a water bill. I scanned each page quickly, photographing them with my phone. Then I forwarded the files to my laptop and slid them into the folder I'd renamed 2 nights before. I told myself I was done being surprised. But life had one more card to play. Wednesday was laundry day. A habit, not a chore. Lyle always left his dress shirts in a heap by the machine. I checked his pants pockets out of routine. That's when I found the folded paper. It was crumpled, but not torn. I smoothed it out on the dryer and stared. It was a form. A request for dependent removal. My name typed clearly. Signature line blank, but someone had scribbled a note in pen across the margin. No need for duplicates. Lyle has everything she needs. Vera's handwriting, the loops on her Ys, the angled slant on her D. I knew it like I knew my own. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I did. Deeply, slowly. I took the paper into my office, scanned it, and added it to my digital archive. Then I whispered, so soft it barely escaped my lips. They think I'm background noise. That's their biggest mistake. The next morning, my phone buzzed as I stirred my coffee. A reply from the contact I'd reached out to last week. Wednesday, noon, bring copies and wear confidence. Wednesday morning arrived clear and cool. I left the house early. Earlier than usual, earlier than necessary. Lyle was still half asleep when I kissed his cheek and said I had a client meeting downtown. He mumbled something about leftovers in the fridge and rolled back over. He didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't offer it. Downtown Austin looked different through the windshield that morning. Clean glass buildings reflected a sky I hadn't noticed in weeks. I parked across the street from a building made of stone and steel. Sleek, quiet, no signs. Just a number on the door. Suite 406. Inside, the law firm's reception area was as crisp as its exterior. Minimalist, matte surfaces, neutral tones, nothing flashy. I told the assistant my name, and within minutes I was ushered into a glass-walled office with a view of the skyline. Marlene Shu stood to greet me. She wasn't what I expected. Petite, mid-50s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a twist, and eyes that didn't flinch. I've read some of the summary, she said as we shook hands, but I'd rather hear it from you directly. I sat, set my laptop on the table, and opened the folder I had built piece by piece for weeks. It's all here, every insult, every theft. She said nothing, just nodded for me to proceed. I clicked on the first file, a recording from the smart home system. The audio filled the room. Callista's voice, unmistakable. She's too dumb to even notice what we moved. Then Vera, chuckling. And she still thinks we're managing things for her. Bless her heart. And Lyle, silent in the background. Always silent. Marlene didn't blink. When the audio ended, she tapped her pen once on the notepad in front of her. "That'll do," she said. I leaned forward. "There's more. So much more." We went through it all. The scanned deed with my forged signature missing. The insurance policy stripped out from under me. Bank transfers under family fund. A scribbled note from Vera about not needing duplicates. Every file tagged, dated, categorized. "I call the folder Oblivion," I said dryly. Marlene glanced at me. "You're more organized than half my clients." "I'm more motivated," I replied. She outlined a plan. Asset freeze petitions, subpoenaing Lyle's financial communications, submitting the audio as part of a mediation strategy, not a public war, yet. "Let them think it's over," she said. "That's when they make mistakes." I nodded. I didn't need fireworks. I needed results. Before I packed up, I pulled out one last screenshot. An old group message from the family thread. My name appeared once, under a photo of Callista holding a wine glass. "Ivania, silent ATM, LOL." I didn't flinch. I just slid it across the table. Marlene took one look and said, "They laughed too soon." The meeting ended quickly. There wasn't much small talk. She was a woman of precision, and I appreciated that. Outside, the sun caught on the glass buildings like knives, cutting through the cloudless sky. I walked out of that office with my spine straighter than it had been in months. They thought I was dumb. They never planned for me to get smart and silent. The invitation came on a Thursday afternoon, the kind that looked harmless at first glance. Vera's name flashed on my screen with a text that read, "We're doing a little family dinner Saturday. Just us and a few of the cousins. Hope you can come. It's time we all talk." No apology. Just a performance dressed as reconciliation. Then, not even 10 minutes later, Callista texted me separately. "I can swing by and pick you up if that's easier." I stared at her message, the faux sweetness practically dripping from the screen. It was so far from her usual tone that it was almost laughable. I replied with a short, "Thanks, I'll drive myself." She didn't push. Saturday evening arrived, and I pulled into Vera's driveway just before sunset. The sky was streaked with orange and indigo, and the house glowed like it always did. Perfect lighting, music drifting from the living room, the scent of rosemary and butter wafting from the kitchen window. Inside, everything was arranged like a Hallmark movie set. Vera greeted me with arms open wide, and that voice she saved for special occasions. "You look radiant, dear," she said, pressing a kiss to my cheek that didn't land. Callista floated in with 2 glasses of wine, handing one to me as if nothing had ever happened between us. "I tried that lipstick you recommended. You were so right. It's perfect." Her grin was too wide, too fixed. I smiled back and took the wine. Lyle was already seated near the fireplace, his arm draped lazily over the arm of the chair, pretending to be engrossed in a conversation with his second cousin. His eyes flicked toward me once, then away. Dinner was served buffet style, but Vera insisted on seating everyone by name cards. I found mine beside Callista, across from Lyle, 2 seats away from Vera. The table was full, cousins, aunts, even an uncle from Dallas who only showed up for weddings and wills. Toast started before the salad plates were cleared. Lyle stood with his glass, clearing his throat. "It's been a hard year, but it's also been one of growth," he said. "And I couldn't have done it without my family. Mom, for holding everything together. Callista, for stepping in when things got tough. And Uncle Ray, for guiding me through the expansion." There was a pause. My name didn't come. He looked down at his wine and sat without another word. I smiled, lifted my glass, and sipped slowly. I didn't flinch, but I didn't forget. Later, I stepped out onto the patio for air. That's when Uncle Ray followed, pretending to be interested in the stars. We exchanged pleasantries until I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded copy of the deed, highlighted where my name had once been. He read it, his brows knitting slowly. "Is this real?" he asked. I nodded. Forgery! The signature isn't mine. Dated 3 weeks after our anniversary. Ray's jaw tightened. This could land someone in court, he muttered. Across the patio, Callista stood by the sliding door, watching us. Her smile dimmed. Later that evening, I went to the powder room, and as I stepped out, I nearly collided with her in the hallway. She didn't move aside. "You think this makes you strong?" she hissed. "All this sneaking around, trying to make us look like monsters?" I tilted my head. "No, but it makes me ready." She stared at me, her face taut with disbelief, like she couldn't decide if I was bluffing or broken. Then she walked off without another word. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Back in the dining room, people were saying their goodbyes. I gathered my purse, kissed Vera's cheek, and thanked her for the meal. Callista avoided my eyes. Lyle walked me to the door, but said nothing. His silence was all the clarity I needed. Outside, the night was cool. The air smelled like wet grass and old lies. I slid into my car and started the engine. My phone buzzed just as I reached the corner. Unknown number, one line of text. "You might want to check what Callista just posted." I pulled into a parking lot, opened my phone, and tapped the app. They weren't done. Good. I hadn't even made it back to my driveway when the notification popped up. A friend I hadn't spoken to in over a year texted me, "You seen Callista's post yet?" My fingers moved faster than my thoughts. I opened the app, scrolled past a few baby pictures and engagement announcements until I found it. A group photo from the dinner. The living room's warm lighting made everything look golden and sincere, like we were a family out of a catalog. I stood in the background, slightly blurred, cropped just enough to feel accidental. The caption, "So grateful to be surrounded by real family. Not everyone can say that." She tagged everyone, cousins, aunts, even Uncle Ray. Everyone but me. I stared at it, heart steady. I didn't feel rage, not like before, not the kind that makes your hands shake or your voice rise. This was colder, deeper, like water that looks calm until you realize it's the kind that drowns you slowly. I set my phone down and walked straight into my home office. The room was dim except for the soft glow of my screensaver. I clicked the mouse. The screen came to life, illuminating the folder I'd been building for weeks. Oblivion. I opened it and began compiling attachments, one by one. First, the voice recording from our smart home system, the one where Vera and Callista laughed about my ignorance, about how we moved everything and she didn't even blink. Second, the scanned deed with my forged signature, time-stamped and highlighted. Third, the insurance change letter, annotated by Vera herself, her handwriting as neat and cruel as always. And lastly, the screenshot from the family group chat, where my name was reduced to a punchline. Silent ATM, LOL. I zipped the file and attached it to an email addressed to Marlene Shu. Subject: Full release, proceed immediately. Body: No more delays. Let them feel what silence sounds like when it hits back. I hovered for a second, then hit send. Done. There was no music playing, no dramatic swell, just the soft hum of my laptop fan and the tapping of raindrops that had started again outside. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, my breathing felt unburdened. But I wasn't done yet. I reopened Callista's post. The comments were piling in. Hearts, prayers, fake warmth. I didn't scroll. Instead, I tapped comment and typed one line. Sometimes silence means consent, and sometimes it's just the sound of a trap clicking shut. I didn't wait to see if she replied. I didn't care if she did. Within the hour, I saw 3 relatives had untagged themselves. Another removed the post from their story. The ground was shifting, and they knew it. I closed my laptop and went to bed. No melatonin, no wine. Just a glass of water on the nightstand and the window cracked open to let in the rain. Around midnight, just as I was about to drift off, my phone buzzed again. A new email. Subject: Family Council meeting scheduled. Friday, 10 a.m. Legal review of estate assets. There it was. I turned off the screen and whispered to no one but myself. They finally want to talk? Good. Let's start with the truth. I arrived 15 minutes early. The law office sat on the corner of 6th and Brazos, tall glass panes reflecting a sun too bright for what the morning held. I stepped out of the elevator and walked into the conference room with a calm I hadn't worn in years. No shaky breath, no racing heart, just a spine made of steel and a folder tucked under my arm, one that had the weight of every silent moment I had swallowed. Marlene was already there, setting up. She nodded toward the chair at the far end. "Your seat's ready." One by one they entered. Vera, in pearls, her face tight behind the kind of smile that's more about performance than peace. Callista followed, too polished, too alert. And Lyle, he looked tired. Or maybe that was guilt. Either way, he couldn't meet my eyes. No one spoke. The room was too quiet, too staged, like everyone was waiting for someone else to start the show. Marlene began. "Today's meeting concerns clarification of estate documents and property assets. Given the complexities involved, we will proceed point by point with relevant evidence presented." Vera cut in with a breathy laugh. "We've always handled things as a family. I'm not sure why lawyers are even needed." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Marlene continued, as if Vera hadn't spoken. "Let's begin with Exhibit A." She clicked her tablet. The speakers buzzed softly, and then the sound played. Callista's voice filled the room, bright and sharp. "She's too dumb to realize we've taken everything." Then Vera's chuckle. "She still thinks we're managing it for her." Silence. The kind that chokes. Vera inhaled like she'd been punched. Lyle went pale. Callista didn't move. I didn't blink. Marlene gave them no time to recover. "Exhibit B," she said. "The property deed transfer." She projected the scan onto the screen. My signature missing. Lyle's name bold and clean. Date highlighted. "Exhibit C," she said calmly. "Insurance modification. Unauthorized, with supporting note." Another image. Vera's handwriting, her neatly penned lie. "No need for duplicates." And then the final blow. Marlene clicked to a group chat screenshot. My face. A laughing emoji beside the words, "Silent ATM, LOL." No one moved. Uncle Ray, patched in from Dallas via Zoom, cleared his throat. "That's her handwriting," he said, pointing to Callista's note. "No question." Another pause. The weight in the room changed. All that power they once held. I watched it leak from their bodies, like steam from a broken pipe. They weren't furious. Not yet. They were exposed, and that scared them more. Finally, I spoke. "You didn't just steal money," I said, my voice steady. "You stole dignity." Callista's jaw clenched. Vera blinked quickly, like she was trying not to cry. Lyle still said nothing. Marlene reached into her briefcase and laid a sealed envelope on the table. "This is a formal notice," she said. "You have two options. Sign the restitution agreement outlined inside, or we proceed with full litigation. This includes asset recovery, public disclosure, and potential criminal charges." She folded her hands. "You have 5 minutes." I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. I leaned back in my chair and watched. This was the part they never planned for. Me, not yelling, not pleading, not bargaining. Just quiet, certain, done. It took 2 full days for the dust to begin to settle, if you could call it that. By Monday morning, Marlene had already emailed the signed restitution agreement. The properties were restored, accounts unfrozen, and my name, my full legal name, was back where it belonged. The digital confirmation hit my inbox at 9:07 a.m., followed shortly by a second message from Lyle's attorney. This one was more carefully worded, with phrases like "mutually beneficial closure" and "a proposed confidentiality clause." In simple terms, it was a non-disclosure agreement, a payoff for silence. I declined. I didn't need to speak to the press. I didn't need revenge in the form of headlines. But I wasn't going to pretend any of it hadn't happened. I wasn't going to help them bury the truth in polite secrecy. My silence had always been for strategy, not comfort. The family group chat went quiet, like someone had pulled the plug. The last message before the silence was Vera's, an out-of-context Bible verse about grace and redemption. No tags, no mentions. Just a floating scripture in a sea of awkward stillness. A few cousins reached out, not directly, but through vague emoji reactions or thumbs up on unrelated posts. One even messaged, "Thinking of you." I didn't respond. I didn't feel the need to. If it took legal action for them to notice I existed, their concern came too late. That Wednesday, I returned to the house Lyle and I once shared. The locks hadn't changed. The flowers I planted last spring were blooming out front, completely unaware of how much rot lay inside. I didn't take much, just what mattered. The wedding photos came down from the hallway, but I didn't pack them. I left them face down on the guest bed. Let him decide what to do with them. I walked through each room one last time. The kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 quiet dinners. The office where I'd once tried to balance books that someone else had already rewritten behind my back. The bedroom we used to share, now too cold to matter. I took the original deed. A few financial binders. My mother's bracelet. And that was it. I left the keys in an envelope labeled Final. As I stepped outside, the air felt lighter, like the house itself had exhaled. I didn't look back when I pulled the door shut behind me. The next day, Vera called. Her voice was careful, the tone people use when they're either about to confess or manipulate, sometimes both. "I just wanted to say," she began, "we never meant for it to go that far." I didn't answer. Let her fill the silence. "We thought you understood, that you trusted us enough to let us manage what needed to be managed." I stayed quiet. "I know you probably hate me right now," she said, voice cracking. "But family is complicated. You don't always get it right the first time." I inhaled slowly, then finally spoke. "You didn't mean for me to find out. That's different." She said nothing, and I ended the call without another word. I didn't slam the phone. I didn't cry. I simply set it down on the kitchen counter and turned back to my tea. Later that evening, I found the folded note again, the one I'd scanned weeks ago. The one in Vera's handwriting, scrawled across my revoked insurance form. "No need for duplicates. Lyle has everything she needs." I stared at it for a while. Then, with deliberate calm, I placed it in a small glass frame and set it beside my printer. Not out of spite, but because every now and then, you need a visual reminder of what you survived. The next morning, Marlene's final email arrived. Subject: complete. Body: settlement posted. Full control restored. You're free. I stared at the screen. The words didn't feel real at first. They hung there, like confetti that hadn't yet hit the floor. Free. It should have felt like flying. Instead, it felt like standing in the ruins of a house I'd built with my own hands, knowing I was the only one who could rebuild it again. And yet, the hardest chapter was still ahead. A week passed. 7 days since the ink dried on the agreement. 7 days of silence, louder than any argument we ever had. I'd thought the legal conclusion would bring a sense of closure, but what settled instead was a kind of stillness, a void, not of peace, but of everything left unsaid. No one called. No apology followed the formal surrender. The family group chat remained frozen. The last message still Vera's lone Bible verse, untouched by reactions or replies. Grace without names. Forgiveness with no direction. On Tuesday, a package arrived with no return label. Inside was the silver-framed photo I'd gifted Callista years ago, a candid from Lyle's birthday, the 4 of us smiling in her backyard. No note, just the image, wrapped carefully, like it still held some value. Or maybe she just wanted to return the evidence. The same evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Vera. Maybe one day we can sit and talk, or pray. It hung there on the screen, blinking like it waited for me to give it weight. I didn't. I read it once and deleted it. Some things don't deserve closure. Some people aren't owed redemption. By Thursday, I'd returned to my usual work rhythm, though nothing about life felt usual. I brewed coffee out of habit, replied to emails I didn't care about, and kept a sticky note on my desk that read, "Stay factual, stay quiet, stay seen." That morning, an email arrived from Lyle. Subject line, "I hope you're okay." The body started with, "I just want to say I'm sorry for how things turned out. No ownership, no mention of the lies, the forgery, the calculated betrayal. Just how things turned out." Like it was a movie with bad writing, or a flight that got rerouted. I hovered over the message for a while, then hit delete. Closure isn't always given. Sometimes you build it yourself, brick by painful brick. That night, I went to a gathering Marcia had invited me to. Just a small dinner with women from her nonprofit board. I almost didn't go, but something in me said I needed to be around people who didn't share my last name, my history, or my wounds. It was a cozy restaurant tucked into a converted bungalow. String lights outside, soft jazz playing in the background, real laughter at the tables. I hadn't heard real laughter in weeks. They asked nothing of me, just welcomed me in. Somewhere between the second glass of wine and the warm peach cobbler, I laughed. Really laughed. The kind that rises up without warning and leaves you lightheaded afterward. I looked around at that table, at women who knew the sting of secrets, of being dismissed, of having to rebuild alone. I realized something then. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who guards your truth. The next day, I met with a woman through the nonprofit. A client. She was in her 50s, newly divorced, financially wrecked by a husband who'd signed her name away more than once. I listened to her story like I was listening to myself 6 months ago. At the end, she asked if she'd ever feel whole again. I didn't lie. Not all at once, but yes, eventually. Later that night, as I poured a cup of tea and sat down with my laptop, a new email appeared. The sender's name made me blink. Lillian Romero, a journalist I hadn't spoken to since grad school. Subject, "If you're ready." Message, "I heard what happened. If you ever want to tell your story, not for revenge, but to help others, I'd be honored to hold the space." I stared at the screen, smiled faintly. Then I closed the laptop and whispered into the quiet of my apartment. I didn't want revenge. I wanted voice. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to use it. The office smelled like fresh paint and ambition. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, touching every edge of the new space I'd leased downtown. The walls were still mostly bare, save for one framed quote in simple lettering above the front desk. "Let them underestimate you, then show them why they shouldn't have." I sat across from the journalist in the modest conference room. No leather chairs or staged floral centerpieces. Just a simple table, 2 mugs of coffee, and a recorder blinking red between us. "So," she asked gently, "why now?" I folded my hands, not to calm myself, but to focus. Because silence isn't strength unless it's chosen. And I stayed quiet long enough. Her eyes flicked down to her notes. "You're not naming anyone publicly in the piece?" "No, I don't need names. I need change." She nodded, hit play. My voice came through cleanly, calm, recounting what happened. Not as gossip, not as scandal, but as caution. When she played the clip from the smart home audio, Callista's words, Vera's laughter, I didn't flinch. "That clip was authenticated and entered into court proceedings," she confirmed. "It's legally safe to include?" "Yes, but it's not about safety, it's about visibility." A week later, the piece went live. The nonprofit foundation, once mocked by Callista as my vanity project, was officially launched. Its funding came directly from the restitution agreement, every cent documented and clean. The logo was simple, 2 initials in a floral script, my mother's. I'd taken them straight from an old birthday card she'd written me, her handwriting scanned and digitized. The mission was clear: support for women experiencing financial abuse. One category on the website read, familial financial erasure. It got attention. Not viral, not scandalous, but it circulated quietly among women's networks, local legal boards, even a national podcast that focused on underreported domestic power dynamics. I didn't watch Callista fall. I didn't need to. But I noticed when her name vanished from the company website. Her headshot was gone from the annual report. I heard, through a former coworker, that she'd lost her board seat after the incident was brought up in a closed meeting. No one asked for details. They just moved on. Without her. Vera clung harder, posted online about grace and spiritual growth, quoted Corinthians. But the comments under her post weren't buying it. Some asked about the recording. One even said, "Funny how forgiveness comes only after exposure." Her church group quietly removed her from their organizing committee. No official statement, just a shift in invitation lists. And Lyle? He didn't reach out, not again. But I sent him something, a box. Inside, the framed wedding portrait, glass cracked from a past move and never replaced. On the back, a yellow sticky note. "This is the only thing you ever had the right to hold on to. And now I don't want it either." I sealed the box myself and dropped it at the courier counter without a flicker of hesitation. 3 weeks later, I sat across from the same journalist in the same office. She smiled. "Last question," she said, recorder already rolling. "What do you want people to take away from all this?" I paused, then answered without blinking. "That silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of someone preparing a war they'll win quietly." She leaned back. "That's powerful." "It's not power," I said. "It's truth." I walked her out, shook her hand, then turned to the open space of the office. A staff member waved from the corner. Another was pinning a flyer for an upcoming workshop. There was coffee brewing. Someone laughed down the hall. And just like that, I walked away. Not broken, not bitter, but louder than they ever imagined I could be. In the quiet that followed, I found something louder than revenge: self-respect. This journey wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about learning that silence, when chosen, is power. I didn't scream. I didn't destroy. I simply stood, gathered my truth, and let it speak for itself. If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel like your value is conditional, know this: you are not alone and you are not powerless. The world won't always apologize, but you don't need an apology to rise. You need clarity, you need boundaries, and you need the courage to walk away, even if you loved them. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to protect your peace, even when it meant losing people you once called family? What did that moment teach you? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched your heart, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's out there listening. If you didn't like the story, tell me why. Your honesty helps me grow. And if you've made it this far, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might speak to your soul. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of louder, braver stories.